Right, for the people who are watching, I am here, just so you know, and we are waiting. But we're going to try and skip the adverts so we don't get crunched, but we'll find out if we get crunched, eh? We will see. Unless you had an issue, I thought, oh my god, the stream's being murdered again. But it hasn't, thankfully. We're alive still. I think the other stream's still going for some fucking strange reason. Anywho. Just waiting for the adverts to finish. And then we will begin said debates. After I had the picture and had the sound. So if you're thinking what's going on with the blank screen, it's adverts, basically. So yes. But it will be on shortly.
TV debate between the two men seeking to be Britain's next Prime Minister. Well, good evening. In just 2 weeks' time, either Boris Johnson or Jeremy Hunt will be elected Conservative Party leader and will become our new Prime Minister. Tonight, they debate each other face to face, responding to questions from our viewers from across the UK. And you at home too can take part using the hashtag ITV debate. And before we take the first question, each candidate will briefly set out why they think they will be the best Prime Minister. Boris Johnson, your opening statement, please.
Thank you, Julie, and to everyone here and at home. This country faces a momentous choice. We can either continue with the same old failed can-kicking approach, destroying trust in politics, sapping business confidence, or else we can change, get back our mojo, restore this country's reputation around the world, and put ourselves on the path to long-term success. And the way to do that is to get Brexit done by October the 31st, unite our country with more money for our schools, more police on the beat, full fibre broadband for all, and make our case to the people again with renewed power and conviction that to have fantastic infrastructure and public services, you must have a dynamic market economy, because that is how we beat the semi-Marxist wealth and job-destroying lunacy of Jeremy Corbyn and the Labour Party. Now, someone who's campaigned for Brexit and who believes in it and who has a plan to unite this country and who has long experience of beating the Labour left, I believe I'm the right person to unleash on this project, and I hope I can count on your support.
Jeremy Hunt, your opening statement.
Good evening, Julie. Good evening, everyone at home. As a tough negotiator, I'll deliver Brexit, but so much more. I'll be the first Prime Minister to have been an entrepreneur, and I'll use that experience to fire up our economy. The first Prime Minister to have run the NHS, and like I did there, will reform and fund our vital public services. I'm the Foreign Secretary who will invest in our brilliant armed services so that we walk tall in the world, and the first Prime Minister for half a century to have won a marginal seat. So I know how to get young people to support our party. In poll after poll, I'm the public's preferred choice for Prime Minister, because I appeal not just to those who already vote Conservative, but those we need to win. And to those watching at home, I'll be your Prime Minister, whoever you vote for, as I bring together our amazing United Kingdom.
Thank you, gentlemen both. Well, we invited viewers from right across the country to submit questions to us. We've independently selected the questioners, and they are with us in the studio tonight. They support various parties or are undecided. The candidates don't know what they'll be asked, and also hear the people who'll listen to tonight's debate. They've said they've voted Conservative in the past or may do so in the future. So let's go to our first question from Tony Scrace. Tony.
I voted Conservative much of my life, but now I support the Brexit Party, and I'd like to see Nigel Farage in number 10. Can you promise me that we will definitely leave the EU on October the 31st?
Tony, thank you. Each now gets a chance to answer separately and then we'll go to a debate. Jeremy Hunt.
Tony, I am as keen as Boris and as keen as you to leave by October the 31st. But, you know, we've had a breach of trust in politics by not leaving at the end of March, as we promised you we would do. And no politician, not me, not Boris, no one should make a promise unless they absolutely know they can deliver it. And Parliament took no deal off the table at the end of March. It's trying to do that again. So the way we get out by the end of October is send to Brussels someone who can negotiate a deal with the European Union. That means someone that they will talk to, someone that they will engage with, and then we can get a deal that gets through Parliament. I'm the person who will do that.
Thank you, Mr Hunt. Mr Johnson.
Well, thank you very much, Tony. I think it's absolutely vital that we come out on October the 31st. Otherwise, Tony, we will continue to hemorrhage trust, not just in the Conservative Party or indeed the Labour Party, but in politics generally. And that's why I have a 4-point plan to deal with our European Union citizens, the 3.2 million. They should have their rights protected. We should make sure that we look after the 39 billion. I think that should be suspended in a state of creative ambiguity above the talks until we get the result that we need, solve the problems of the Irish border where they properly belong in the context of the free trade agreement, that we will do after we come out on October the 31st. And to make our friends and partners across the Channel concentrate and to understand our seriousness, we must simultaneously prepare to come out without a deal. And I think everybody understands the business sense of doing that.
Okay.
We can do that, we will be ready, and we'll come out on October the 31st.
Thank you, Mr Johnson. Mr Hunt, Mr Johnson said in his opening statement, warning against can kicking. People may be worried that not with a definite guarantee on the 31st, that may be what you're doing. How do you respond to that?
Well, I think I'm far more likely to get us out by the 31st of October because I have a plan which involves engaging with the European Union, negotiating with them. But I just want to test, because Boris has mentioned this date a lot, and I just want to know how solid that commitment is. If you don't get us out of the EU by the 31st of October, will you resign?
We're going to come out on October the 31st. And I think anybody who goes into this negotiation proposing yet again to kick the can down the road will, I think, run the risk of forfeiting trust with the electorate and also undermining our negotiating position in Brussels.
Could you answer Mr Hunt's question?
Delay does not deliver a deal.
Julia,
a deadline will deliver a deal. And we must stick to that deadline.
I think it's a no. And what we've got is someone who says it's do or die for
I'm sorry,
the country.
I'm sorry. I think what we have with
I asked you if you'd resign, Boris.
What I have with my opponent is somebody
Will you resign if you don't deliver it, yes or no?
My opponent is clearly not committed to coming out of the EU on October the 31st.
No, I just wanted to ask if you'd resign if you don't deliver it.
Right, gentlemen, it won't... Excuse me, gentlemen, sorry, can I just say,
Julie,
it will not help if you speak over one another.
No, I understand.
So please, could you respond to the question that Mr Hunt has put to you, Mr Johnson, and then you can respond, Mr Hunt.
I think it's very, very important not to envisage any circumstances in which we would fail to come out of the EU on October the 31st. I don't want to hold out to the EU the prospect that they might encourage my resignation by refusing to agree a deal. And I think it's extraordinary that we should now be seriously telling the British electorate that we could propose to kick the can down the road beyond October the 31st. We did it in March the 29th. I'd like to know how much further, how many more days exactly would my opponent be willing to delay?
Mr Hunt, respond to that.
Julie, this matters to me because my birthday is actually on the 1st of November, and nothing would be a better birthday present than knowing we've left on the 31st of October. Now, I asked Boris a straight question, and he said very clearly before that it was leaving on October the 31st, do or die.
It is.
And I think it's do or die for the country, but not a Prime Minister who will put his own neck on the line. And that is not leadership.
Could you respond to Mr Johnson's question about when then, if it's not the 31st, how much longer? Is it days, is it weeks, is it by Christmas?
Well, the reality is that if you have a Prime Minister...
How about Christmas?
If you have a Prime Minister...
Christmas any good?
If you have a Prime Minister who has gratuitously insulted the other side, and not that Boris would ever have done that, then there won't be engagement. And my worry, frankly, is that you're setting a fake deadline because we'll end up with an election before we have Brexit. And the great irony about this whole debate is that if you think about the most Brexit-supporting Conservatives like Jacob Rees-Mogg and Steve Baker and Mark Francois, they're actually more likely to get Brexit with me than with Boris.
Can I make a
because I have a plan to deliver it.
Thank
I
you.
will get the engagement with the
Let
European
Mr Johnson
Union
respond.
that makes it
Can I make
you.
a serious point about why I think this strategy is so fatal? We saw in March the 29th that we were only going to delay, if you remember, to April the 8th. That became a further 6-month delay. Our preparations for a no-deal Brexit sagged again. Business was left in a state of deep confusion about what was happening. If we go into these negotiations from the beginning, with a plan to allow that deadline yet again to be fungible, to be a papier-mâché deadline, I'm afraid that the EU will not take us seriously.
Okay,
And nor will
Gentlemen.
business understand that
Thank
they
you.
must prepare
Thank you.
for no deal.
Can we get
Boris,
some
you said
detail?
it was
Please,
do or die.
gentlemen.
Delays,
It's not do or die, is it?
delays make it
It's
impossible
Boris in number
to
10 that
deliver
matters.
a deal.
Thank you. Could I just ask some specifics, please? Because both of you say that you want to renegotiate. The EU has repeatedly said they will not renegotiate. They will not reopen the withdrawal agreement, nor will they open that specifically to look at the Northern Ireland backstop. Can you give me precisely what your proposal is for the Northern Ireland border, Mr Hunt?
Yes. First of all, it has to be different to the backstop because that will not get through Parliament. And my plan for the Northern Ireland border has 3 elements based on a 202-page excellent piece of work by a group of MPs led by my friend Greg Hands. So what does it involve? It involves, first of all, mobile checks for food products. Secondly, a trusted trader scheme. And thirdly, use of technology. Not new technology, but technology that already exists.
Okay, very briefly, how quickly is that there and available?
Well, the technology exists. It will obviously take some time to set
Well,
it up.
if it were there, why wasn't it already agreed?
Well, because obviously the EU didn't want to agree it because they would have rather
But
we
it could
stayed
be
in
done
the
by
customs
October the
union.
31st, could it? It could be
Mr.
done by
Johnson,
October the 30th. Sorry.
What is the detail of what you propose on the Irish
Well,
border?
as everybody knows, there are an abundant range of solutions of maximum facilitations for checking, for rules of origin, for contraband, for smuggling, much as is in Greg's paper, but away from the border. And everybody understands that that is how to solve the issues of the frictionless trade, not just at the border with Northern Ireland, but all UK-EU borders.
But
And the
forgive me, but
crucial
the
thing...
EU has said they looked the world over to find a solution. They were looking for a solution on this. They found none.
Well, actually, that's not what Michel Barnier says. He's been very
Sabine
clear.
Veilland, the deputy negotiator, said they looked the world over for a
They've been
solution.
very clear that under no circumstances would they have a hard border or physical checks at the border in Northern Ireland. That is because they understand, as Jeremy has rightly just said, and there's no difference between us on this point, that it is possible to find the solutions to frictionless trade across the Northern Ireland border and indeed every other border.
Okay,
the question is, it can be
thought.
done by October the 31st. If it's not ready by October the 31st,
Okay, gentlemen.
then we do it in the implementation period.
OK, we're going to stay with this subject. It won't surprise. We're going to go to question 2 now on another matter of Brexit, and we're going to Amar Seth, who has another question for us.
I run my own waste management company. A no-deal Brexit is a frightening prospect for my industry. Jobs will be lost and my business simply won't survive if tariffs are imposed. What can you say to reassure me?
Thank you very much indeed, Mr Seth. Boris Johnson.
Well, thank you, Anwar. And I understand very much the issue that you raise. I don't think that we're going to end up by any means with a no-deal exit. That's to say, I don't think there will be the disruptive or disorderly Brexit that you fear and whose risks have been, I think, been escalated in public discourse. What we want to do is, by preparing for no deal, by being very convincing with our European friends and partners about what we intend to do, to get a proper protraction of the existing zero tariff, zero quota arrangements, all the current recognition of our rules, mutual recognition of our rules, until such time as we've done the FTA and solved the problem of the Northern Irish border.
Thank you,
that
Mr.
is the way to do it.
Mr Hunt.
Well, Amar, I ran my own business just like you do. And I know what it's like when you have to lose really valuable, trusted employees because there's a sudden change in market conditions and you can't afford to keep someone absolutely brilliant who you want to keep. And if there was no deal, the truth is that You know, the steel business that I visited in Kidderminster a couple of weeks ago would have suddenly 11% tariffs that would wipe out their profits. Farming businesses would suddenly have 40% tariffs on their lamb. It would be very serious. We can get through this, but we can't get through it on a wing and a prayer. We can only get through it if we plan. And I have a 10-point Brexit plan. I've actually got a copy of it here, which has all the details of how we would help businesses like yours get through that no-deal situation.
Thank you, Mr Hunt. Mr Johnson, Mr Hunt accepts there is a cost to no deal. Do you?
Well, I certainly think that badly handled, a no-deal, a disruptive no-deal Brexit could be costly. But the crucial thing, and I think everybody is agreed on this in the Conservative Party, the crucial thing is to prepare. So we can get rid of... Now, this is a great country.
How costly?
Well, it's vanishingly inexpensive if you prepare. So, for instance, what we need to do is to make sure that the agricultural sector is properly safeguarded and that we have... just-in-time supply chains properly protected, that we have deals on aviation, and all that. Much of this work has been done. We're virtually that. And I'll just make one additional point. We will have, if we have to go out on no deal, we will have £39 billion to spend, which I think will be very helpful in lubricating the consequences of a no-deal Brexit.
Mr Hunt,
Boris, last time we debated this, you said that in a no-deal situation we'd be able to avoid tariffs through something called, I think you called it Article 24 of GATT. And
yes,
then
Article 24, paragraph 5b.
Good. Well, Geoffrey Cox...
Since I know you're a stickler for detail, Jeremy.
Well, Geoffrey Cox...
And tend to go on about it.
Mr Johnson.
Good. Well, Geoffrey Cox, who is supporting you, says that that would not be possible. Indeed...
No, he doesn't.
yes, he does.
No, he doesn't.
Because he says...
No, what he says...
Mr Johnson, let Mr Hunt finish.
All right, sorry.
What he says is that you could only get that agreement to waive tariffs if the other side agreed. And they have made absolutely clear that they won't agree. And do you agree that getting details like that wrong is fine for a newspaper column, but if you're Prime Minister, that is people's jobs at stake?
No, because I think only a defeatist and somebody who actually was on the other side of the argument for so long and somebody who didn't wish to, in fact, to come out would take that line. Because actually, if you look at what we've proposed, it's very, very sensible. Under the GATT 24 paragraph 5b arrangement...
Only if the EU agree to it.
Only if the EU agree, Boris. You know that. You know that.
Tariffs, and it would be manifestly, and I've never said anything different, it would be manifestly...
You did. Last time you said we wouldn't face tariffs if there was a no-deal situation.
Yes, because I think it would be...
People like Ammar that he doesn't have to worry when they absolutely
for the EU to impose tariffs on...
Boris, we're not going to leave the EU without a deal with optimism. We have to have the details to help people like Ammar's businesses.
Thank you. I did say, please, gentlemen, please. I don't want you talking over one another. Mr Hunt.
Thank you. My point is that you said we would leave with no deal, with no tariffs. That was wrong. You also said, Boris, that it would be 1,000,000 to 1 that we would leave with no deal. Well, I have to tell you that is totally unrealistic. And if you say that, what you're actually telling businesses like Ammar's is that they don't need to prepare for no deal. And that is very dangerous for the jobs of people like Ammar up and down the country. And I think we have to be responsible and tell people they do need to prepare because the chances of no deal are actually much higher than you're talking about.
Mr Hunt, you have said that if you were pushed to it, you would do it with a heavy heart.
Yes.
A question to you first and then to Mr Johnson. Could you look people in the eye as Prime Minister and saying, I am taking you down a route in which I will preside over you losing your job?
I will not say that because I will prepare our businesses. As someone who's run their own business, last week I announced a £20 billion package of support to help businesses like Ammar in a no-deal situation, including the biggest ever cuts to corporation tax in our history, down to 12.5%, £6 billion of support for farmers and the fishing community. So if we prepare, we can get through this. But what we mustn't do is pretend this is going to be a walk in the park. It is going to be very, very challenging.
I don't think there's no conceivable dissent about that. Everybody agrees that we need to prepare. But we also need to make sure that we are ready by October the 31st to come out. And we must get ready. We were virtually ready on March the 29th. Everybody was braced to do it. They were then stood down. It was a catastrophe. Everybody's preparations were allowed to sag. We cannot do it again. If we're going to have a deadline of October the 31st, we must stick to it and we must get ready. And the more we prepare and the better we prepare, the less risk of disruption for people like Anwar and everybody else. And the reason I say that the risk is minimal is that when we prepare, and we're
Right.
convincing in our preparations, the EU will understand
Okay, we are
that we
staying
are
with
ready
this.
and they will give us the deal that we need.
For the moment, Mr Johnson. Mr Hunt, thank you very much indeed for that. We're staying with Brexit, so we'll just pause for breath and go to Karen Tracy, who'd like more detail on the dangers of a no-deal Brexit too. Karen.
The leader may be changing, but fundamentally nothing else has. Parliament will not sanction a no-deal Brexit. Isn't a general election now inevitable?
Thank you very much indeed, Karen. Mr Hunt.
Well, Karen, you have summed up why I have not wanted to talk about the 31st of October as a do or die deadline, because I think there is that risk of an election. And because Parliament has taken no deal off the table already, if you were to say that you are going to guarantee a date, you have to be prepared to take us into a general election, because you might need to change Parliament if you can't get the majority for that no-deal Brexit. And I believe, I'm the person, by the way, who would win over more non-Conservative voters than either of us, according to the polls we've seen. But I don't want to do an election until we've delivered Brexit, because I don't think you go back for another mandate to the British people until you've done what you said you'd do last time, which is to leave the European Union.
Thank you.
And that's what I'll do.
Mr Johnson.
Well, I think that I think that it's totally defeatist not to set a hard deadline and to set October the 31st as the moment we.
But you
come
won't
out.
resign if we don't get it.
Mr Hunt.
Because I don't want, as I say, I don't want to give the EU any incentive not to give us the deal that we want. And Parliament, contrary to what my opponents have just said, Parliament has actually just resisted the temptation to vote down no deal. They've done it again, and I think an outbreak of realism is taking place across our politics. People can see that we are fatally losing trust of the electorate. And they can see that we asked people 3 years ago whether they wanted to leave the European Union. They returned an overwhelming verdict that they wanted to come out. Parliament has failed to deliver that for 3 years. If we now fail again, then I'm afraid we will not win back the hundreds of thousands of voters who are currently deserting us for other parties. And that is how to lose the forthcoming election.
OK.
Boris, the difference between you and me, I'm sorry. Being Prime Minister is about telling people what they need to hear, not just what they want to hear. And the difference between you and me is you are peddling optimism, and I'm saying we can make a tremendous...
Needs a bit of optimism,
Boris,
frankly.
why don't you... We can make...
I think we've had a belly full of defeatism.
We need leadership that is going to guide us through a big constitutional crisis and make a great success of Brexit. And that means being honest with people about the challenges. Look, blood, sweat, toil and tears. Who said that? That was someone who told us about the challenges ahead, led
Blood,
us
toil,
through
tears
it.
and sweat, actually, is what he said.
That is what I'm prepared to do. And I say to you, Boris, now, minimising the risks of no-deal Brexit to farmers who will have their businesses wiped out when they can't export lamb anymore to the EU, to small businesses like Amars that are suddenly going to be faced with very challenging market conditions. That is not being the Prime Minister this country deserves, because these are challenges we can overcome.
I'm sorry, what I'm
They're
hearing
challenges you overcome by facing up to them,
What I'm hearing
not by
again
ducking them.
I want to ask the same question to both of you. If Parliament rules out a no-deal Brexit, would you be prepared to prorogue or suspend Parliament to get to the ends that you want to see?
Well, I think when that's happened in the past, when Parliament's been shut down against its will, we've actually had a civil war. And I think it would be a rather curious thing to do if this is about taking back control for Parliament to actually shut it down. So my answer to that is no. How about you, Boris?
Well, I'm not going to take anything off the table any more than I'm going to take no deal
so no answer.
off the table. And I think it's absolutely bizarre at this stage in the negotiations for the UK yet again to be weakening its own position. We've heard earlier on that the October the 31st deadline is not really a deadline. It's not clear at all from what Jeremy is saying when he'd be prepared to come out. He's been once again escalating the fears of a no-deal Brexit, when what we should be doing is getting ready and encouraging the people of this country to believe they can do it, because they can do it.
So
and it's absolutely vital that we prepare for no deal, that we come out on October the 31st, and then we Conservatives will be able to talk to the people of this country about the things that really matter to them apart from the EU.
Okay,
and believe me, there's plenty that they want to hear about.
To return to the question from Karen, she said Parliament will not sanction a no-deal Brexit. Isn't a general election now inevitable? If we do end up in that Karen, she said Parliament will not sanction a no-deal Brexit. Isn't a general election now inevitable? If we do end up in that scenario, Mr Johnson, would you do a deal with the Brexit Party?
I don't believe in doing deals with any party. I think that the Conservative Party is a great party. It's a broad church. One of the advantages I have in this campaign is actually I already have the support of more than half of the Conservative Parliamentary Party, dozens of Remainers as well as Leavers. We can deliver Brexit ourselves, get the job done, and then make the case to the country about modern conservatism and all the fantastic things we're going to do.
Mr Hunt, you don't want a general election. You've been very clear about that. What would your alternative be?
Well, I think we need to choose the Prime Minister who has the best chance of negotiating a deal so that we don't have to face this issue. And the truth is that...
You may be forced into facing the issue.
Yes, and I've said that I will make the preparations for no deal so that we are ready to do that. But if we send someone to Brussels who is a negotiator by background, who can engage with other European countries, we have, I think, a chance of a deal, because I talk to European leaders and they want to solve this. They don't want a no-deal Brexit as well. But if we go with the wrong attitude, if we take an ultra-hardline approach, they will take an ultra-hardline approach too. And then businesses like Amars up and down the country will suffer needlessly. And so that's why I think if we want to make a success of Brexit, it's not about blind optimism. It's about understanding the details that will get us the deal
Mr. Hunt,
that is right
Mr. Hunt,
for
Mr. Johnson
our
was
country.
shaking his head there.
Well, I think actually if we continually try to wrap ourselves around the current withdrawal agreement and we remain in the customs union and in the single market, which is effectively what is entailed by the present withdrawal agreement, which I resigned over it because it obviously doesn't work for this country.
And you voted for it.
We will end up
Boris,
with
you
a
voted
situation...
for it too, didn't you?
We will end up with a...
Did you not vote for it? Just answer the question. I know you haven't liked answering
Not over each
that
other,
we will
please.
end up in a situation in which this country, having left the EU, is effectively run by the EU. I think that's utter madness. We have the chance now to do a much, much better deal. We should be doing a free trade agreement with our European Union friends and partners, massively to the benefit of either side, then developing a new partnership based on mutual security, mutual defence, all the things that we believe in, and actually intensifying our friendships with our European Union friends, but not through Brussels. That is the way forward.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Johnson. So, gentlemen, we're coming to the end of part one. We've had nearly half an hour of debate about Brexit, lots of proposals and counter-proposals from both of you. So just before we go to the break, we'd just like some real clarity for the audience here and for our viewers at home. No answer required. Question to both of you. Raise your hand if you feel confident telling the British people that we will have left the EU by the 31st of October.
Well, that's the spirit, Jeremy.
There we
Thank
go.
you very much, gentlemen.
Come on, the one to do it. I'll make it happen.
You're going to fool me.
Well, that's pretty clear. Please
thought he said
don't
it
go
couldn't be
away.
done.
As you can see, much more debate between the two candidates to come. After the break, we'll discuss who has the right character and personal qualities to be Prime Minister. And yes, we might talk about Donald Trump too. Welcome back to ITV's head-to-head debate, where we spent the first half talking about Brexit, of course, and now we're planning to look at some other issues. Let's have our next question, and it comes from Kemi Ogunleye. Kemi.
You are both politicians who have made mistakes, but I'm interested in why your personality and personal qualities make you the right person to be our Prime Minister.
Kemi, thank you. First of all, to Boris Johnson.
Well, Kemi, thank you very much. I think that the thing I would advertise to you, and if I don't blow my own trumpet, nobody else is going to do it at this stage. I think that what I have, I think, is an ability to get some surprising results in very, very difficult situations. Nobody said I could win the mayoralty in London in 2008. Nobody said we could win the European Union referendum in 2017, and we did. And when I defeated Ken Livingstone in 2012, a considerably wilier and more devious emanation of the London Labour left, by the way, than Jeremy Corbyn, I was able to come from behind and beat him when our great party was 17 points behind in London. So I think I have what it takes to unite our party, unite our country, get Brexit done, beat Corbyn.
Jeremy Hunt.
Well, I've won a few elections too. In fact, as I mentioned earlier, I'll be the first Prime Minister in half a century to have won a marginal seat. But I think that leadership is also about your values. And that is about being prepared to do the tough and difficult things, sometimes the things that aren't popular, sometimes things that you have to say to your friends that you'd rather not say, like I said to President Trump today, because I think his comments about Theresa May were unacceptable, and I don't think he should have made them. As I did with the Chinese last week over Hong Kong, and indeed when I was Health Secretary for nearly 6 years, I had some very difficult decisions, some very tough times, but by the end of my time as Health Secretary, we had nearly 3 million more patients in good or outstanding hospitals. So I think leadership is about people who get things done, and those are the qualities that I offer.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hunt. Mr. Johnson, straight to the point over President Trump's comments about both the Prime Minister and the UK's ambassador to the US. What's your stance?
Well, look, I have a very good relationship with the White House, and I'm very proud of what I was able to build up during my time as Foreign Secretary. I think it's very important that we should have a close friendship, a close partnership with the United States. They're our most important ally. I think the single most important geostrategic fact of the last 100 years has been the closeness between the US and the UK.
What do you make of what he said?
I don't think, he was dragged into a British political debate in a way he sometimes is. I don't think that's necessarily the right thing for him to do, as Jeremy has said. But let's face it.
So is he wrong to make those comments?
Our relationship with the US is of fantastic importance. On Kim Darroch and on British civil servants, I would just say this. I think it is absolutely vital that the advice that civil servants give to ministers should not be leaked by ministers and should not be commented on by ministers if civil servants are going to feel free to give that advice with the impartiality that they want.
Just to get some facts on this particular point, will Sir Kim Darroch still be in his job at the end of his tenure if you become Prime Minister, Mr. Hunt?
Well, look, I will say this about the relationship with...
It's quite a quick yes or no.
I'm going to answer your question, Julie, and I've answered it very clearly already tonight, but I believe that the relationship with the United States and the relationship between the UK and the USA is the most important alliance in history. On that, I agree with President Trump. But who chooses our ambassadors is a matter for the United Kingdom government and the United Kingdom Prime Minister. So I have made it clear that if I am our next Prime Minister, the ambassador in Washington stays, because it's our decision.
Could we have the same confirmation from you, Mr. Johnson?
I listened very carefully to what Jeremy just said. I repeat my point. It is vital that our civil service is not politicised by ministers leaking what they say.
Will he still be in his job come January?
Whoever leaked that deserves to be eviscerated.
Boris, just answer the question for once. Go on. Tell us if you'll keep the ambassador in Washington. Come on.
Kim
I know.
is, I'm not going. I'm not going to.
No one
would you
here
mind?
is going to
I'm
tell
not going
anyone.
to-
Just
I'm not
tell us
going
the
to-
answer.
I'm
Go
not-
on, Boris.
Well,
Debrek,
how long
you
would
haven't
you keep
liked
him?
answering.
So would you like to keep him beyond Christmas when he normally retires?
Well, he's due to retire until Christmas, and I will certainly keep him until he's
After
due
Christmas.
to retire.
Okay. Okay.
I will
But
do
would
that.
you
Yes,
keep
now,
him
what
beyond-
about you, though? You've asked me a
Gentlemen,
question.
thank you.
It's interesting.
I think we want to know your
you're the
answer,
Foreign
Boris.
Secretary.
Mr. Hunt,
You're
let
the Foreign
Mr.
Secretary.
Johnson
I
answer.
think we'd all
You're
like
the
to hear
Foreign
him
Secretary.
answer.
So you're going to keep him into... You wouldn't keep him beyond... You wouldn't extend his term out of sympathy?
I will keep him until he's due to retire, and I think we'd like to know if you would.
Well, I'm not going to be so presumptuous as to...
Thank
think
you.
that I'm going
Okay.
to be in a position
Let's go
to
back-
take that. But what I will say is that I and I alone will decide
Okay.
who takes important and politically sensitive jobs, such as the UK
Okay.
ambassador to the US.
Thank you.
And we will do it in that way.
Thank you, Mr. Singh. Kemi's question talked about personality, personal qualities. You've both held high offices of state, foreign secretaries both, and health secretary. Mr. Johnson, why didn't you do your homework on Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe?
Well, look, on Nazanin and other very difficult consular cases in Iran, I have the utmost sympathy for her family, and the other cases that are similar. And indeed, I pay tribute to the work of the Foreign Office in continually trying to get them released. But I may say it's very, very important that when you consider those cases, that we all point the blame where it belongs, which is with the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, who are detaining not just Nazanin, but several others in a way that is inhumane, illegal and unfair. They are responsible, and we should not inadvertently exculpate them in any way.
Mr. Hunt, you talked earlier this evening about your time as Health Secretary. You presided over the first doctors' strike, junior doctors' strike, in 40 years, which saw A&E close at one point. Your plans for a 7-day NHS were criticised as being incoherent and uncosted. Why would we trust you in a negotiation?
Because, Julie, we had a problem, which is that we had excess deaths for people admitted at weekends. And I said, as Health Secretary, I'm going to do something about this. And I would not be a Prime Minister who courted popularity. I'd be a Prime Minister who did the right thing. And after 5.5 years as Health Secretary, some very difficult reforms, we had many, many more people using good or outstanding hospitals. One of the safest hospitals in the country is right here in Salford, and they inspired me for a lot of the reforms that I did. And I made those changes, and it wasn't easy, but we had success, we had progress, and I think we can be proud of the doctors and nurses in the NHS who have risen to the challenge and are doing such a great job.
Could I just ask one more specific question to do with the negotiations that might lie ahead of us? Could people trust somebody who originally voted Remain to see through Brexit?
Yes, because we had that debate 3 years ago, and the country decided to leave. The question now is who is the person who can deliver that decision. Now, Boris campaigned for 350 million a week extra for the NHS. I actually delivered it. I'll deliver Brexit as well.
Thank you very much, both, for that.
Well, we haven't delivered Brexit yet, and we will.
And we will
get more money
That's
back.
right.
Thank
as
you.
a result of leaving the EU. Which
Thank you very
would not
much.
have been the case if
Now,
your
both
side had
candidates. Both candidates have made a number of pledges and spending commitments over the past few weeks, and our next questioner, Debbie Hode, wants to ask something related specifically to that. Debbie.
Despite earning a decent salary, I struggle to make ends meet for my family every month. Why are both of you now prioritising tax cuts for the rich or businesses rather than helping those hardest hit by austerity?
Debbie, thank you. First of all, to Mr Hunt.
Debbie, let me answer that question very directly. So the tax cuts that I prioritised are corporation tax cuts. I recognise they are not the most popular tax cuts, but I'm doing that because I want to boost the growth rate of our economy. When President Trump, a totally different issue to the one we've been discussing this evening, when he introduced business tax cuts in the US, he boosted their growth rate. America's now growing at twice the rate we are, And if we grew at 3.5%, we'd have an extra £20 billion to spend on tax cuts for people on low incomes like you, or for our precious public services like the education system, the social care system, and extra police numbers. So as a Conservative and as someone who set up a business, what I want to do is to grow the size of the cake so that we can do what we all want to do, which is spend that money on the things that people
Thank you,
need.
Mr Hunt. Mr Johnson.
Absolutely right. Good to hear that support there for President Trump, at least on tax cuts. But I think that, Debbie, what you say is completely right. My agenda would be to focus on those who are hardest pressed. And I would remind you that when I was Mayor of London, we massively expanded the London living wage, putting millions of pounds into the pockets of some of the poorest families in the city. That was then adopted by the government as a national strategy. What I would like to do is to increase the thresholds for national insurance for people on low incomes. But I also believe that too many people, hard-working people, public servants, whether they're senior nurses or heads of maths departments or police inspectors, are being dragged into the higher rates of taxation. And that seems to me to be a legitimate subject for Conservatives to focus on and to want to fix as well.
Okay, Mr. Johnson,
and I agree that the way to get more growth out of the economy is judicious tax
I'm trying
cuts
to
that
carve up
stimulate
the time
enterprise.
on these equally. Thank you. Mr Johnson, why was your first pronouncement in this campaign one on tax cuts for the wealthiest?
It's part of a, Julie. It's part of a package that
it was
we
the
want
first thing that you mentioned.
It was part of a package.
Boris, it was a mistake.
It was part of a package.
Tax cuts
Please,
for the
thank you.
rich.
I say,
I want to
I'm
say
talking
this
to
now.
Julie.
I have spent my life
Just
trying
one
to
moment, Mr.
persuade
Hunt.
people that we are not the party of the rich. If your very first tax cuts are for higher rate earners, that is sending the wrong message about our party.
Thank you, Mr. Hunt.
I'm not actually Prime Minister at the moment. So, you know, my programme is for a wide-ranging package, starting with the people on low, modest incomes, so that we help them with what has been a very, very difficult time.
Boris, is it?
And I also think, and if Jeremy is now going to say, perhaps he is, if he's now going to say that he has no interest whatever in alleviating the burden on the press middle, then let him speak now.
I will.
If he thinks it is right.
If you'd let me get a word in, Boris.
We are
nurses
Mr.
and
Hunt,
police inspectors
Mr. Johnson, let Mr. Hunt respond.
should be dragged
Thank you,
in
Mr.
to
Johnson.
the higher rate of tax.
Thank you,
Then
Mr.
let him
Johnson.
confirm it. A simple yes or no will suffice, Jeremy. Are you in favour of people on moderate middle incomes paying the higher rate of tax? Yes
Boris,
or no?
I will
yes
answer.
Or no?
I will give you your yes or no
interrupting me.
Mr.
question.
Johnson, you've asked the question. Allow him to respond.
Boris, you haven't answered any of my questions.
I've answered all your questions.
Not one.
I've answered all your
I think
questions.
it's time.
I've answered all your questions.
It's time you answer. I mean,
you haven't told us. Well, let's get
Mr. Johnson, please.
No, this is one of the reasons. This is one of the reasons these blue-on-blue debates are so embarrassing.
And you haven't done any until after people have voted. Is that why?
Let's be clear.
No, let's be clear.
Us when his deadline is. When is his deadline
question.
for leaving the EU? He hasn't told us. He hasn't got the faintest idea.
Boris.
He's not going to leave on October 31st.
Stop, please, Mr. Johnson. Mr. Hunt, briefly. Thank you. Thank you.
Does he think people on middle incomes should be paying the high rate of
Mr.
tax?
Johnson.
He won't tell us. I'm only asking.
Thank you.
This is because.
What's his answer? What is his answer?
Thank you.
You know, the exciting thing, because Boris never answers the question, we've got absolutely no idea what a Boris premiership would be about. I will tell you the answer to the question, Boris, and it's very straightforward.
I'll tell you.
My priority for tax cuts will be people on low incomes.
Well,
because I have... Hang on.
Right.
Let you speak. I think you have to let other people speak as well. Why is that? Because I have spent my life trying to persuade people that we are not the party of the rich, we are the party of everyone. And if the very first tax cut you announced, which is what you did, is tax cuts for higher rate earners, that is the wrong signal about our values as a party.
Right, I'm going to draw a line under there. Thank you both. Enough. Finished with that. Thank you. We're now going to have something a little different. We had hundreds of questions from ITV viewers, and now we're going to have a quick fire section on a wide variety of issues to try to learn a little bit more about what kind of views our next Prime Minister will have. So we'll just draw a little breath and reset, gentlemen. This from John from Bognor Regis. Should HS2 be abandoned, Mr. Johnson?
I don't think it should be abandoned. I think it's extremely expensive and I think the business case is dubious. I think we should examine it. We should do a review, and I want to see whether the cash, which is huge, 100 billion, should be better prioritised in the north of the country.
Thank you. Mr Hunt.
No. We have been talking about bridging the north-south divide for years and years. Now we have a project that is actually going to deal with it. We should back it to the hilt.
OK. Judith from Bury St Edmunds, will you commit to an urgent solution for social care this year, Mr Hunt?
Yes, I want a 10-year plan for social care, just like I negotiated a 10-year plan for the NHS. I want to merge the health and social care systems, and I want a country where every single older person is treated with dignity and respect.
Yes.
Mr Hunt.
Yes, and I think that we need a national consensus about social care, because we've got to take the politics out of this, and we need to bring people together across parties to get it done.
Just very quick one to this. Thank you. Renato from Richmond, will you stop Heathrow Airport expansion from going ahead? Bulldozer at the ready, Mr Johnson?
Well, the bulldozers are a long time off.
Tell us a secret. Answer the question, Boris.
Third
runway, yes or no? Go on.
I retain the gravest reservations about the third runways and promoters' ability to satisfy their legal requirements, both on noise pollution and on air quality, and I will be following the legal cases with great interest.
Mr Hunt.
So if you're going to be Prime Minister, you've got to have an answer to those questions.
Could you just give us your answer on
My
this,
answer
please?
is yes. Third runway will help spread wealth around the country. We should back it.
Thank you. One more question. Pauline from Doncaster, would you scrap universal credit, Mr Hunt?
No. It's the right system. It's got teething problems. We need to deal with the 5-week wait, which has caused a lot of distress. But the principle is right, and it's got a lot of people back into work, and that's why we've created 1,000 jobs a day for every single day we've been in office, something we can be very, very proud of.
OK.
No.
Universal credit.
No, I would keep universal credit. Speaking as a constituency MP, I do find people who have problems with it, but they are being addressed, and I do think it's the right way forward and helps people into work.
OK, very briefly, Andrew from Manchester has asked about LGBT rights in Northern Ireland after 2 overwhelming votes in the Commons today in support of extending same-sex marriage and abortion rights there. Would you support that, Mr Hunt?
Yes.
I think it's a matter for the people of Northern Ireland, and one of the most important reasons for getting the Stormont government in Northern Ireland back up and running.
Thank you both very much, gentlemen, for your answers to those quick-fire questions. I think we covered quite a bit of ground there. And now there is just time for one more short question from Josh Brown.
What one quality do you most admire in your opponent as a future Prime Minister?
So we can just be lovely to one another. You perhaps choose to or choose not to. Mr Johnson.
Well, I've worked very well with Jeremy over many years. I think I greatly admire his ability to change his mind on and campaign for Brexit now, and I think that's a very important attribute.
Well, I really admire Boris's ability to answer the question. He has this great ability. You ask him a question, he puts a smile on your face, and you forget what the question was. It's a brilliant quality for a politician. Maybe not a Prime Minister, though.
Perhaps you'd briefly like to come back on that, Mr Johnson.
Well, I do think it's important, by the way, just absolutely seriously, I do think it's important to have somebody now who has the energy and has the optimism to get this thing done. And I think the managerialist approach with which we've approached these European Union debates in the last 3 years has really let us down.
Okay, Mr.
What we
Hunt,
need now is somebody
briefly.
who believes in Brexit.
So there was I thinking we were going to finish by saying nice things about each other. I love the optimism, but unless you have a bit of realism with it as well, things start to go wrong. And I want to deliver what I promise as Prime Minister.
Gentlemen, thank you for that very much indeed. Thank you. A fascinating 50 minutes of debate between Boris Johnson and Jeremy Hunt. I will now ask the candidates for a very short concluding statement. And first of all, to Jeremy Hunt.
In the last 2 weeks, I've travelled more than 5,000 miles around our incredible country, and I've seen with my own eyes just how lucky we are. But for me, this is not about becoming Prime Minister. It's what you want to change when you get there. I want young people to support our party because state schools are as good as private ones. Families to support us because we help them buy a house, and older people to be sure the social care system is there for them. Boris promised money for the NHS. I delivered it. I will deliver Brexit as well. I only make promises I can keep, and our country deserves no less.
Boris Johnson.
Thank you. Well, thank you. There's only one way to get this country off the hamster wheel of doom, and that is to get Brexit done by October the 31st, to bring us all together with fantastic infrastructure, better education, and by fighting crime, and to end the defeatism that seems to have engulfed us all with a new can-do spirit of modern conservatism. And I have the energy and the credentials for the job. This is an amazing country. Now is the time to show that we believe in Britain.
Jeremy Hunt, Boris Johnson, thank you both very much indeed for that. And that is all we have time for. We'll have much more analysis, of course, on all our social media platforms and on News at 10. Thank you for watching. Good night.
Well, that was fucking entertaining, to say the least. Jesus fucking Christ. We're so fucked. Ugh. Fucked. Anyway, hope you enjoyed the stream. I'll upload Politics Live later on tonight or something. Because I know I cut the show short because this bollocks was on. But I'll upload it later or tomorrow.